Chapter 20. I became Tommy's carer almost a year to the day after that trip to see the boat. It wasn't long after Tommy's third donation, and though he was recovering well, he was still needing a lot of time to rest. And as it turned out, that wasn't a bad way at all for us to start this new phase together. Before long, I was getting used to the Kingsfield, growing to like it even. Most owners at the Kingsfield get their own room after third donation, and Tommy was given one of the largest singles in the center. Some people assumed afterwards I'd fixed it for him, but that wasn't the case. It was just luck. And anyway, it wasn't that great a room. I think it had been a bathroom back in the holiday camp days because the only window had frosted glass and was really high up near the ceiling. You could only look out by standing on a chair and holding open the pane. And then you only got a view down onto the dense shrubbery. The room was L-shaped, which meant they could get in, as well as the usual bed, chair, and wardrobe, a little school desk with a lift-up lid, an item that proved a real bonus, as I'll explain. I don't want to give the wrong idea about that period at the Kingsfield. A lot of it was really relaxed, almost idyllic. My usual time to arrive was after lunch, and I'd come up to find Tommy stretched out on the narrow bed, always fully clothed because he didn't want to be like a patient. I'd sit in the chair and read to him from various paperbacks I'd bring in, stuff like The Odyssey or 1001 Nights. Otherwise, we just talk, sometimes about the old days, sometimes about other things. He'd often doze off in the late afternoon when I'd catch up on my reports over at his school desk. It was amazing, really, the way the years seemed to melt away and we were so easy with each other. Obviously, though, not everything was like before. For a start, Tommy and I finally started having sex. I don't know how much Tommy had thought about us having sex before we started. He was still recovering after all, and maybe it wasn't the first thing on his mind. I wasn't wanting to force it on him, but on the other hand, it had occurred to me if we left it too long, just when we were starting out together again, it would just get harder and harder to make it a natural part of us. And my other thought, I suppose, was that if our plans went along the lines Ruth had wanted, and we did find ourselves going for a deferral, it might prove a real drawback if we'd never had sex. I don't mean I thought this was necessarily something they'd ask us about, but my worry was that it would show somehow in a kind of lack of intimacy. So decided to start it off one afternoon up in that room, in a way he could take or leave. He'd been lying on the bed as usual, staring at the ceiling while I read to him. When I finished, I went over, sat on the edge of the bed, and slid a hand under his t-shirt. Pretty soon I was down around his stuff, and though it took a while for him to get hard, I could tell straight away he was happy about it. The first time, we still had stitches to worry about, and anyway, after all the years of knowing each other and not having sex, it was like we needed some intermediary stage before we could get into it in a full-blown way. So after a while, I just did it for him with my hands, and he just lay there, not making any attempt to feel me up in return, not even making any noises, but just looking peaceful. But even that first time, there was something there, a feeling, right there alongside our sense that this was a beginning, a gateway we were passing through. I didn't want to acknowledge it for a long time, and even when I did, I tried to persuade myself it was something that would go away, along with his various aches and pains. What I mean is, right from that first time, there was something in Tommy's manner that was tinged with sadness, that seemed to say, yes, we're doing this now, and I'm glad we're doing it now, but what a pity we left it so late. In the days that followed, when we had proper sex and we were really happy about it, even then, the same nagging feeling would always be there. I did everything to keep it away. I had us going at it all stops so that everything would become a delirious blur and there'd be no room for anything else. If he was on top, I'd put my knees right up for him. Whatever other position we used, I'd say anything, do anything I thought would make it better, more passionate, but it still never quite went away. Maybe it was to do with that room, the way the sun came in through the frosted glass so that even in the early summer it felt like autumn light. Or maybe it was because the stray sounds that would occasionally reach us as we lay there were of donors milling about, going about their business around the grounds, and not of students sitting in a grassy field arguing about novels and poetry. Or maybe it had to do with how sometimes, even after we'd done it really well and were lying in each other's arms, bits of what we'd just done still drifting through our heads, Tommy would say something like, I used to be able to do it twice in a row easy, but I can't anymore. Then that feeling would come right to the fore, and I'd have to put my hand over his mouth whenever he said things like that, just so we could go on lying there in peace. I'm sure Tommy felt it too, because we'd always hold each other very tight after times like that, as though that way we'd manage to keep the feeling away. For the first few weeks after I arrived, we hardly brought up Madame or that conversation with Ruth in the car that day. But the very fact of my having become his carer served as a reminder that we weren't there to mark time. And so, too, of course, did Tommy's animal drawings. I'd often wondered about Tommy's animals over the years, and even that day we'd gone to see the boat, I'd been tempted to ask him about them. Was he still drawing them? Had he kept the ones from the cottages? But the whole history around them had made it difficult for me to ask. Then one afternoon, maybe about a month after I'd started, I came up to his room and found him at his school desk, carefully going over a drawing, his face nearly touching the paper. He'd called for me to come in when I'd knocked, but now he didn't raise his head or stop what he was doing, and just a glance told me he was working on one of his imaginary creatures. I stopped in the doorway, uncertain whether I should come in, but eventually he looked up and closed his notebook, which I noticed looked identical to the black books he'd got from Keffer's all those years ago. I came in then, and we began talking about something else entirely, and after a while he put away his notebook without us mentioning it. But after that, I'd often come in and see it left on the desk or tossed beside his pillow. Then one day we were up in his room with several minutes to kill before we set off for some checks, and I noticed something odd coming into his manner, something coy and deliberate, which made me think he was after some sex. But then he said, "Kath, I just want you to tell me honestly." Then the black notebook came out of his desk, and he showed me three separate sketches of a kind of frog, except with a long tail, as though part of it had stayed a tadpole. At least that's what it looked like when you held it away from you. Close up, each sketch was a mass of minute detail, much like the creatures I'd seen years before. "These two I did thinking they were made of metal," he said. "See, everything's got shiny surfaces, but this one here, I thought I'd try and make him rubbery, you see, almost blobby. I want to do a proper version now, a really good one, but I can't decide. Kath, be honest, what do you think?" I can't remember what I answered. What I do remember is the strong mix of emotions that engulfed me at that moment. I realized immediately this was Tommy's way of putting behind us everything that had happened around his drawings back at the cottages. And I felt relief, gratitude, sheer delight. But I was aware too why the animals had emerged again, and of all the possible layers behind Tommy's apparently casual query. At the least, I could see he was showing me he hadn't forgotten, even though we'd hardly discussed anything openly. He was telling me he wasn't complacent and that he was busy getting on with his part of the preparations. But that wasn't all I felt looking at those peculiar frogs that day, because it was there again, only faint and in the background at first, but growing all the while, so that afterwards it was what I kept thinking about. I couldn't help it as I looked at those pages, the thought went through my mind, even as I tried to grab it and put it away. It came to me that Tommy's drawings weren't as fresh now. Okay, in many ways, these frogs were a lot like what I'd seen back at the cottages, but something was definitely gone, and they looked labored, almost like they'd been copied. So that feeling came again, even though I tried to keep it out, that we were doing all of this too late, that there'd once been a time for it, but we'd let that go by. And there was something ridiculous, reprehensible even, about the way we were now thinking and planning. Now I'm going over this again, it occurs to me that might have been another reason we were so slow to talk openly to each other about our plans. It was certainly the case that none of the other donors at the Kingsfield were ever heard talking about deferrals or anything like that, and we were probably vaguely embarrassed, almost like we shared a shameful secret. We might have been scared of what might happen if word got out to the others. But as I say, I didn't want to paint too gloomy a view of that time at the Kingsfield. For a lot of it, especially after that day he asked me about his animals, there seemed to be no more shadows left from the past, and we really settled into each other's company. And though he never asked me again for advice about his pictures, he was happy to work on them in front of me, and we'd often spend our afternoons like that. Me on the bed, maybe reading aloud, Tommy at the desk drawing. Perhaps we'd have been happy if things stayed that way for a lot longer, if we could have whiled away more afternoons chatting, having sex, reading aloud, and drawing. But the summer drawing to an end, with Tommy getting stronger and the possibility of notice for his fourth donation growing ever more distinct, we knew we couldn't keep putting things off indefinitely. It had been an unusually busy period for me, and I'd not been to the Kingsfield for almost a week. I arrived in the morning that day, and I remember it was bucketing down. Tommy's room was almost dark, and you could hear a gutter splashing away near his window. He'd been down to the main hall for breakfast with his fellow donors, but had come back up again and was now sitting on his bed, looking vacant, not doing anything. I came in exhausted. I'd not had a proper night's sleep for ages and just collapsed onto his narrow bed, pushing him against the wall. I lay like that for a few moments and might easily have fallen asleep if Tommy hadn't kept prodding my knees with a toe. Then finally, I sat up beside him and said, "I saw Madame yesterday, Tommy. I never spoke to her or anything, but I saw her." He looked at me, but stayed quiet. "I saw her come up the street and go into her house. Ruth got it right, the right address, right door, everything." Then I described to him how the previous day, since I was down on the South Coast anyway, I'd gone to Littlehampton in the late afternoon. And just as I'd done the last two times, I walked down that long street near the seafront, past rows of terraced houses with names like Wavecrest and Seaview, until I'd come to the public bench beside the phone box. And I'd sat down and waited, again, the way I'd done before, with my eyes fixed on the house over the street. It was just like detective stuff. The previous times I'd sat there for over half an hour each go and nothing, absolutely nothing. But something told me I'd be lucky this time. I'd been so tired I'd nearly nodded off right there on the bench, but then I'd looked up and she was there, coming down the street toward me. It was really spooky, I said, because she looked exactly the same. Maybe her face was slightly older, but otherwise there was no real difference. Same clothes even, that smart gray suit. It couldn't literally have been the same suit. I don't know. It looked like it was. "So you didn't try and speak to her?" "Of course not, stupid. Just one step at a time. She was never exactly nice to us, remember?" I told him how she'd walked right past me on the opposite side, never glancing over to me. How for a second I thought she would also go past the door I'd been watching, that Ruth had got the wrong address. But Madame had turned sharply at the gate, covered the tiny front path in 2 or 3 steps, and vanished inside. After I'd finished, Tommy stayed quiet for some time. Then he said, "You sure you won't get into trouble? Always driving out to places you're not supposed to be?" "Why do you think I'm so tired? I've been working all kinds of hours to get everything in. But at least we found her now." The rain kept splashing outside. Tommy turned onto his side and put his head on my shoulder. "Ruth did well for us," he said softly. "She got it right." "Yeah, she did well, but now it's up to us." "So what's the plan, Kat? Have we got one?" We just go there. We just go there and ask her. Next week, when I take you for the lab test, I'll get you signed out for the whole day. Then we can go to Littlehampton on the way back." Tommy gave a sigh and put his head deeper into my shoulder. Someone watching might have thought he was being unenthusiastic, but I knew what he was feeling. We'd been thinking about the deferrals, the theory about the gallery, all of it for so long. And now, suddenly, here we were. It was definitely a bit scary. "If we get this," he said eventually, "just suppose we do. Suppose she lets us have 3 years, say, to ourselves. What do we do exactly? See what I mean, Kat? Where do we go? We can't stay here. This is the center." "I don't know, Tommy. Maybe she'll tell us to go back to the cottages, but it'd be better somewhere else. The White Mansion, maybe, or perhaps they've got some other place, somewhere separate for people like us. We'll just have to wait to see what she says." We lay quietly on the bed for a few more minutes, listening to the rain. At some stage, I began prodding him with a foot the way he'd been doing to me earlier. Eventually, he retaliated and pushed my feet off the bed altogether. "If we're really going," he said, "we'll have to decide about the animals. You know, choose the best ones to take along, maybe 6 or 7. We'll have to do it quite carefully." "Okay," I said. Then I stood up and stretched out my arms. "Maybe we'll take more, 15, 20 even. Yeah, we'll go and see her. What can she do to us? We'll go and talk to her."